Welcome back to Make Good Choices Monday. I'm Becky Amio, and today I really want to talk to you guys about balance in horses. Now, I'm not talking the kind of balance where you try to figure in how to fit your horses into your family life and your work schedule and your other hobbies. I'm talking about physical fitness balance in horses. So if that sounds interesting to you, stick around. This is going to be a really cool conversation that's constantly evolving. So I'm going to tell a lot of stories in this particular video to help give you guys an understanding of where I'm coming from and how I've learned some of this material. Most of it has been from the School of Hard Knocks and just the sheer numbers that I've worked on. I do have a bachelor's and master's degree in animal science, specifically in equine, so there is a science background there, so there is some science to back it up. But I really feel like I didn't learn this stuff out of a book per se. Like, there isn't a book that I can direct you to and say, go read this book and it's going to explain it to you and help you understand it, because you have to feel it. You have to feel it to really know. And I remember really truly becoming aware of balance when I first moved to South Dakota. And it was mostly because I was starting so many little teeny 2-year-olds. And then I was riding them out in the pasture. And most people, when you say pasture, you kind of think, at least I think, flat, kind of soft, rolling hillsides, right? And these pastures that I first started in were the Badlands. I mean, we were talking steep downgrades, steep upgrades, and the horses were raised out on it. So they were good, so to speak. They were mentally capable of handling the terrain, but physically they were not, with a rider on their back. And what I found is that I'd be going downhill on a 2-year-old, and I had probably spent more time in the arena and the round pen with these 2-year-olds than I do today. Definitely way more than I do today. I'd be going downhill, and we're going down nice and slow and baby steps, and then all of a sudden they would pick up speed, and they'd pick up more speed, and they'd get like this little avalanche kind of feel to them, and they just pick up more speed until they were in a trot, and then they were in that really quick trot where they almost break into a lope on you, and you're trying to hold them up, and they're gapping their mouth, and that look, and you're trying to redirect them, but you can't stop this avalanche, and they don't mean to be going that fast. They're not running away with you, but they can't support themselves. They can't support themselves with a rider on their back. And I started to figure it out that they didn't have the balance to navigate those hills with me on their back. And it didn't matter if they were little bitty 2-year-olds or if they were 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds that I was riding for the first time out. And so I started to take a closer look at that. And that's really where I started to look at saddle fit too. So if you guys haven't seen any of my saddle fit videos, I think I'll try to link them in the description box below so you can take a look at some of them. So that's when I really started to address the saddle fit. I couldn't figure out why my saddle was going up their necks and up their shoulders. I was having to use cruppers on things. So I started to really address, what do horses do when they lose their balance? They speed up. Perfect example, they speed up and they go down the hill faster than they started. They slow down. Some of those little bitty 2-year-olds, when I rode them, I'm a very forward rider. If you guys haven't noticed it yet, watch some of my videos. I am super forward. I know this is a problem. I have to consciously tell myself to sit back, feel like I'm touching my ponytail to my horse's tail. That's how much visualization it takes for me to sit back in the saddle, and I still don't sit back very well, okay? I know that's one of my biggest downfalls sometimes when I'm trying to get maneuvers done, okay? So if I would get too far forward on these colts and I'd throw them off balance, they'd just stop. They'd just stop and go, I can't go forward anymore. And when I sat back and I got vertical and even with my shoulders, my hips, and my knees, those colts would go forward for me again. My barrel horse, she keeps me real honest. If I get too far forward on her, she will hollow out her back, stick her head up in the air, and kind of give me side eye and go, "What do you think you're doing? You need to sit down." Fun size is getting that way too. If you guys, we're going to get a video here in probably the next couple of weeks of something on fun size that I really want to slow-mo down and show you guys something that I did on him, and it's very evident. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Side note. So, two things that horses do when they get off balance. They speed up and they slow down. That's why it's so hard to teach a horse collection. Collection is balanced. So they kind of want to zip and zoom all over the place because it's hard to get into collection. It's hard to be balanced. How many of you guys have gone to the gym? You can't just walk into the gym and suddenly squat 200 pounds. You can't just suddenly go into the gym and bench press 200 pounds. It takes some work ethic and practice in developing yourself to get the absolute most out of yourself in order to do those maneuvers correctly. The third thing that a horse does when they get out of balance is they buck. Now, 3 times in my career of doing flying lead changes, I try to get a flying lead change on every single horse that I ride. I've gotten better at evaluating the ones that just aren't plain ready to do it yet, and I don't push and I wait until they get older before I ask it of them. But 3 times in my life, I have been bucked off doing a flying lead change. You know why? Because I throw the horse off balance when I do a flying lead change. Okay? I get away with a lot of stuff on a horse's back. Part of the time, it's due to my size. Part of the time is just knowing and understanding the physics of the horse's movement and how to set them up properly to get the job done. But when you throw them off balance that much, they will buck. That's why sometimes horses buck going downhill. That's why they buck. Like if they spook at something and they jump and you're hanging halfway off of them or doing whatever you're doing, then they go into a bucking fit because you've thrown them off balance. Okay? So how do we develop balance in a horse? How do you get it? Well, when I first started horses, I used to spend an entire month on groundwork. I would spend another month riding in the round pen, and then I would spend another month riding them out. And that was my curriculum. And my curriculum's evolved over the years. Now, sometimes now I spend 2 months on groundwork now that I can, and I'm my own boss. But I distinctly remember a 2-year-old colt that I was working on, little gelding. You know, it's not super ambitious little gelding, so it was kind of hard to get him to go forward in the first place. And we were working in the round pen, and I could not get this sucker to lope to save my life. I could get him to lope a few strides, but he couldn't hold a lope the whole entire circle of the round pen, the 50-foot circle. And the guy I was working with at the time, he said, I made the comment to him, you know, well, this colt's not balanced. Because I knew if he couldn't hold the lead or hold a canter or a lope on that small of a circle, and he couldn't lead, he wasn't balanced yet on that circle, okay? He couldn't do it. Like if we took the walls down, this colt would not be able to hold that circle at a lope. And his comment to me was, well, this colt's as balanced as he's gonna get. And I kind of scratched my head, and I knew it wasn't right, but I couldn't put my finger on why what he said wasn't right. Do you guys have moments like that where somebody says something and you're like, that doesn't feel right to me. I know it's felt different. And that's kind of how I felt about that, but I couldn't explain it at the time. Now, we can watch them play and screw off with their friends in the pasture, and they might do flying lead changes, and they'll spin around and rear up and take off again with their buddies, and they'll run down the fence and turn each other back on the fence line. But that's not with a rider on their back, and we're not asking them to do it over and over and over again. We're not putting a bit in their mouth and basically screwing with their head, for lack of a better phrase, okay? So how do we develop that balance? Again, When I was doing all that groundwork, what I didn't realize is I was developing them physically at the same time. I mean, I know we're getting them in shape and, oh, we're putting them to work and we're taking the popcorn and the potato chips out of their hand and we're giving them work ethic and all those good sayings, you know, when we put them to work and we put them in training. But, you know, we always look at that as, or at least I looked at it as, you know, we're developing the mind, we're desensitizing, we're making sure that they're okay with all these things, we're making sure they make good choices to all of the things that we're kind of throwing at them and all the new games and whatnot. But what I didn't realize is that I was developing their body physically at the same time. Being able to walk, trot, and lope in the round pen on the correct lead, both directions, and hold it, and then when you step out of their space and they come across in front of you and change directions and change their lead, that's all developing muscle memory, and that's developing their balance. You know, and the next thing that we need to address is the mind. And it's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? And this is where it gets really deep, really, really deep. A horse doesn't have the ability to worry about whether they have their mortgage due, their truck payment due, whether their best friend is going to get out of the hospital because it's sick. They don't have that ability like we do. They have the ability to worry about whether they can physically do something or not. So, we're trying to ask our horse to do something and they can't do it because A, they've never been shown how to do it before, and physically they cannot. If they all could do it, all the horses would be 4th level dressage horses at the Olympics. All horses would be jumping 6 foot. All horses would be at the NFR. All horses would be tie down calf roping horses. Okay? So how do we get them from that 2-year-old that couldn't lope a circle in the round pen to being that next superstar? Okay? It's mental and physical, how we have to develop them. And so when you're dealing with the emotional and mental state of the horse, we have to address the physical, and when we address the physical, we have to develop the emotional and mental state. How do you do that? Good question, right? So, if the horse doesn't have the ability to worry about the stuff that we worry about, then what do they worry about? I'm going to say it again. They worry about physically not being able to do something. So we hear a lot that when a horse is in pain, they don't perform. True. They can't. This is why we have gait problems in barrel horses. This is why we have box problems in rope horses. If hocks are sore, if stifles are sore, if the navicular bone is sore, they don't want to go to the arena, they don't want to turn the barrel, they don't want to stop hard, they don't want to do all of those basic things that they've been taught to do. How do we fix that? Well, when we're developing them, we need to create a level of acceptance in them mentally and emotionally. So we have to constantly check into their emotional state as we're working with them, but we also have to make sure that physically they're doing the maneuver properly. Remember last week's episode with the 2-year-old? The first time we ask a horse to do something, they're going to learn it, okay? And they're going to also learn that emotional and mental state that they had when they learned that, okay? So this is where I say it gets really, really deep. We need to make sure that obviously, A, there's no pain involved. We need to make sure that they're doing the maneuver correctly. We need to make sure emotionally they are not worried about the particular maneuver or whether they can or can't do it, and help them to the best of our ability to do that maneuver, whether it is a roll on the fence, loping off, trotting off, holding that circle, you know, really, really basic stuff. If we have a horse that is over anxious or worried or troubled or distracted mentally and emotionally, we're not going to get the job done physically. But how do we get through to them emotionally and mentally? We have to put them to work, okay? Now, just like in people, when we have anxiety, when we turn that worry into work and we do something and we take action, when we're in a state of frozenness or overthinking or overreacting to something, when we turn that into action, some sort of positive action, we help with that worry and that anxiety and that being troubled to the circumstance that we're in. So with the horses, we put their feet to work, okay? We have to get those feet moving. Easiest way to do that on their back, drop to trot lead changes, man. Drop to trot lead changes. I preach drop to trot lead changes. If you're on the ground, directional changes. Have them going across, come back in front of you, go across, come back in front of you, go across, go back in front of you. Always turning into you, always facing. If you're on a line, obviously always facing you. If you're free lunging, always turning in and facing to you. The more you can get their feet moving, the more you can change directions. The quieter they get and the better their footwork is. We have to speed up their feet. We're not making their feet move fast enough. Now, I don't mean completely ridiculously out of control. You have to have an endpoint in mind when you're doing this. You have to know what it feels like at the end. And I think I'm going to be putting a video out about this here soon enough because I've had enough people ask me about this. In the beginning, it looks really ugly. It looks really crazy. But what you ultimately get is a horse that's carrying themselves around confidently after your session is through. And so I'm probably, look for that video. That's probably coming in the next month. I have several horses I can show you this on, including a lesson horse and student that are working on this right now. So we turn that worry into work, and we can develop them emotionally and mentally to where they kind of take that sigh of relief and go, I can do this, okay? They have to know that they can do it, okay? So we have to give them a job, but we have to have a result at the end of the job that allows them to accept it and understand on a mental and emotional level and be able to find balance. And when they can physically do the job, they are going to be more accepting, more willing, more trying, more understanding, and more calm to their circumstances when they know what's expected of them and they know how to do that job physically. Okay? I really hope all of that made sense. So on those youngsters, it takes a lot of work physically, mentally, and emotionally to get those little guys just to lope a 50, 60 foot circle. It really does. It takes a lot of core on my part. I have to have really strong stomach muscles, really strong obliques, and I have to have a lot of leg on them and supporting them. And when I say leg, I don't mean I'm spurring them. I mean I'm holding them and supporting them with my thigh and calf to get them around those circles. It takes a lot to get them to go in a straight line. And I need to do a video about that too. That's another one on the list. Let's remember that one. Holy geez. I'm not kidding you guys. It takes a lot of work to get one to go in a straight line. Now let's talk about some of the older, more advanced horses, okay? You know, there's a lot of horses that are out there doing it despite the rider. There's a lot of people that are out there blaming their horses why their horses are screwing up making a run or not getting the job done. I was riding in a barn here not too long ago with a gal that was not getting her right lead on her horse. And she asked for help, and of a friend of mine, and I butted in and I said, and I told her drop to trot lead changes. And she said, well, he's just fighting me on it today. And I was watching it, and there was no fight in this horse whatsoever. Like, zero. Like, I think you could have over and undered this sucker, and he still wouldn't have, like, gotten after it, you know? And I said, no, I go, no, let's change the vocabulary. He's not fighting you. I go, you just got to set him up and ask for it in a different spot. And I helped her get it asked for in a different spot, and she started getting her lead. So that's another topic we need to get into, is our conversation about the words we use around horses. But I digress. Those older horses that are doing it despite the rider, you know, why do, this might be a whole other video too, why do some horses that are bred exactly the same, like full siblings, go on to be world beaters, and we got a full brother, full sister over here, or half brother, half sister, that didn't amount to anything? It's because the one that's the world beater figured out how to use himself. He's balanced. He figured out how to use his body correctly, okay? And as trainers, riders, horse handlers, jockeys, whatever you call yourself, we have to figure out how to help our horse use himself or herself correctly, okay? And so we have to develop them through teaching them collection, lowering the neck and head, elevating the back, using the hind end, developing the obliques, moving their feet, learning these maneuvers. We have to do all these things to teach our horses how to use themselves properly, how to get out of their own damn way. And once we do that, we have a more confident individual. We have a brave individual that knows their job, that knows what's expected of them. They don't get worried. They don't get anxious. They don't have a come apart on us. They don't run off on us in the middle of an event. And then we have to step up to the plate and be as good of a rider as we can be on that given day to put it all together. So when we look at it from that perspective, you know, and somebody tells me or asks me, have you ever had your leg run into on the round pen, you know, when you're riding a colt around? And I said, no, I never have. And he goes, man, it hurts. You don't want to run your leg into the round pen. Well, I don't get on them in the first 3 days anymore. They know their boundaries in the round pen. They know what their spatial point is and how close they can get. I've always attributed it to how much time I spend in the round pen. Well, I've never been run into a rail. You know, the guys that are having these huge come aparts aren't spending enough time on this stuff. And if my horse is having a come apart when I bump on his back on day 1, 3, 7, 9, I don't care what your lucky number day is. Everybody has a certain day that they go, oh, once you get past this day, you know, they're fine. I don't care what your day is. But if your horse is having a come apart on that day of your ride, then you didn't develop them correctly in your groundwork when you got to that point. And I'm just as guilty of it. I have lots that have had their come aparts with me on like ride 11 and ride 15, okay? So I'm not immune to this either, but I can look back and reflect back on and go, yeah, that's where that hole was. I know where that hole was. I know where I should have fixed that, but I was ignoring it. You know, and we all have that spot where we go, I'll ignore it, I'll fix it later. I still have those. I'll ignore that for now. I'll fix it later, or that'll come with time. I think we all have that to some degree. The stuff that we know that we can fix, or it will work itself out usually. You know, and something else about balance. Muscle development in horses comes quickly. When it's done right, it's come quickly. I can develop a top line on a horse, a set of obliques on a horse, a set of glute muscles. I can develop that in 2 months on a horse. So this is not something that takes years and years and years, despite what the upper level dressage community tells you. And I do it with my groundwork. And then once I get on their back, it's pretty easy from there on out. I don't know, you guys, this is a topic that I can go on and on and on about. Please ask your questions in the description or in the comment section below. I think this is a topic that's always evolving and changing, and I learn something new every year when I get a whole new group of horses that comes in, you know, in different sizes and different shapes and different top lines and different angles to their shoulders. I learned something new about balance in horses and developing them physically, emotionally, and mentally. And I really believe you cannot have one without the other. So all that being said, I know this was a long one. Thanks for hanging in there if you guys stuck around this long. I really appreciate you watching. I hope you guys make good choices, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.